Gill, Exposition of the entire Bible. This is 2 Thessalonians, brought to you by Discovering the Scriptures, being read by Dr. Peter John. Introduction to 2 Thessalonians. The second epistle was written, not from Athens, as the superscription testifies, nor from Rome, as supposes, but from Corinth, from whence was sent the former, and where the apostle and Timothy and Silvanus met, and which was sent about half a year after the other, the design of which is to comfort and support the Thessalonians under the afflictions and persecutions they endured for the sake of the gospel, and to rectify a mistake they had gone into, and which might be occasioned by what the apostle had said in his former epistle concerning the second coming of Christ, as though it was just at hand, which might lead them to neglect their worldly business and duties of civil life, and give the enemies of the gospel an advantage against the whole of it as false, should not this prove true, as also to exhort this church to take notice of disorderly persons, such as were idle and busybodies, and withdraw from them, and remove them from their communion, as being not only burdensome to them, but a reproach to the profession. End of the introduction to 2 Thessalonians. John Gill's Exposition of the entire Bible. Introduction to 2 Thessalonians, chapter 1. This chapter, besides the inscription and salutation, contains a thanksgiving for the flourishing condition in which the graces of the Spirit were in these saints, and consolation of them under their suffering circumstances. The inscription and salutation are in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 1, and are as usual. The thanksgiving is in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 3, for the growth of their faith, the abounding of their love, and their constant patience under persecutions and afflictions, insomuch that the apostle also glorified of them for these things among other churches. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 4, and as an encouragement to them to continue patient under sufferings. He observes that this was a token of the righteous judgment of God, and that they were reckoned worthy of his kingdom for which they suffered. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 5, and of which righteous judgment they might be assured from the nature of God himself, whose justice required a retribution of vengeance to their persecutors, and rest to them with the apostles. 2 Titus chapter 1, verse 6. The time of which rest and ease is pointed at, as that it will be at the coming of Christ, which is described by the place from whence he comes, heaven, by his retinue, his mighty angels, by the manner in which he shall come in flaming fire, and by the vengeance he will execute, the object of which are also described by their ignorancy of God, and by their disobedience to the gospel of Christ, and by the nature of the punishment inflicted on them, which will lie in an expulsion from the presence, power, and glory of God, and an everlasting destruction of soul and body. 2 Titus chapter 1, verse 7. But as for them, the persecuted saints, and which is mentioned for their comfort, Christ shall at this day be glorified and admired in them and by them. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 10. Wherefore the apostle prays for this perseverance of them, that the good work of faith might be performed in them, and they enjoy the glory they were called unto, and that Christ might be glorified in them, and they in him, not according to their works, but according to the grace of God through him. 2 Titus chapter 1, verse 11. Reading by Dr. Peter John Priestes. This is brought by Discovering the Scriptures. This ends the introduction of 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, introduction.